So today is lesson 9 of COMP2084G. So we're going to do as much of our shopping cart and checkout as we can today. There may be a few little features we're going to have to leave out just in the interest of time, because we've only got 3 more lessons and we still want to cover unit testing, which we'll need a couple weeks for, and then a quick lesson on Web API in our final class. So I did see the assignments rolling in. I haven't gotten everybody's assignment 2 part 1, but I have gotten most of them, which is great. You're really not going to be able to start on assignment 2 part 2 until after next week's class when we look at unit testing in .NET. The good news for you is there is no homework this week, not even a quiz. So there is nothing you need to do after this week's class. No quiz this week, and there is no graded learning activity either. We're going to have 1 more of those. So let's have a look at our plan for today. We're basically just going to kind of dive into the shopping cart, pick up where we left off. So I did send out an announcement, an email earlier, asking you to please sign up for a Stripe payment gateway account. So the link is on D2L, but it's also in my email. So we're going to complete the shopping process. We're going to integrate identity into our cart if we have time. And then we're going to hopefully implement the Stripe payment gateway, generate a confirmation page, as well as a scaffold out a quick order list and order history page is what we want to do today. So heavy on the coding today. We're not doing other activities. As I said, nothing else graded for you this week. So let's open up our beer store application and start your IIS Express server so we can see where we left off last week and we can dive right back into the cart this week. So I've already got my project open. We were working a lot on our store controller last week. So last week we had written a add to cart method. We created a function that would help us identify the customer. And then lastly, we had a cart page. So let's go and run this stuff, see how it's all working out. I'm also going to just connect to my database in Management Studio because we'll probably want to look at some things in there as we go along today. So I'll just open up my beer store so that it's available whenever we need to check anything here. So how did we leave things off last week? We populated our store link, I think 2 weeks ago, and then I could click on a category. I could add something to my cart, and then we just scaffolded this page. So we haven't made any changes at all. This was just what the scaffolding gave us. If I wanted to keep shopping, I could go back and buy something else. And now there's 2 items in my cart. So we've got this functional cart page. It is in no way a finished page. I can think of at least 5 or 6 changes that are required on this page. What should we do to clean it up? How does this page look to you as a shopper? Yes, Ryan, I agree. We can fix up the look. Can we be a bit more specific? What are some specific changes we should make to this scaffolded view? Okay, Parth, that's definitely a good idea, is we should show the cart total for sure. Yep. What else do we want to do? Yep. We can either change the customer ID or we could hide it because at this point we don't even have it yet. Remember, we're just using a GUID. So the customer is going to assume it's their cart So we could probably get rid of this column altogether. Okay, so we want to show the total. We can hide the identifier for the cart. Yep, we want to format the price as currency. Some other things missing and some things that I think are here that we probably should remove. What about the date created and product? What would a customer expect to see here? Is this what a typical shopping cart looks like? Yeah, good suggestion, Riley. Let's show the product name, and we'll even make it a link to go back to the product details. Anything else for the product? There's usually one other thing about the product we might typically see in the cart, in addition to making sure the name shows up. We've got the price. We should show the name. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Let's also include a thumbnail of the image as well. The date created column, I don't think we need. And the create new, edit the details, all those links we can remove. So we're going to clean this up, and then we're going to have a keep shopping button and a checkout button. So let's open up our cart, our store cart view, and let's start cleaning this stuff up. So I'm going to go to Views and Store and open up the cart file. First thing I'm going to do is just change the heading on line 4 and on line 8 to Your Cart. Optional, really. I'm going to get rid of this paragraph with the link that says Create New. We don't need that at all. I'll use Bootstrap to style the table a little more. I'll add table-striped and table-hover, so Ryan doesn't think the cart's quite so boring. I'm going to get rid of the customer ID heading and the date created heading. We don't really need either one of those. I also want to make the product the first column in the table. So right now the product appears over here. I want product to be first. So I'm going to move this heading and then the data over to column 1. I'm going to highlight what's now my third heading, drag it up. So now my column headings in order are product, quantity, and price. And I'm even going to add a blank heading here so that after we have the product name in the next column, we'll display the image. But I don't think we really need a heading that says image or photo. We can just leave that heading blank. So then I'll come down to my loop, and I'm going to make the same changes. I'm going to get rid of the customer ID. I'm going to get rid of the date created. I'm going to move my product name column up to be the first column. In my list of links, I'm going to keep the delete link, but I'm going to get rid of edit and delete. We don't need those. I'm also going to add in the second column, I'm going to add check and see. If there is an image, I want to display it. So we'll write a little if statement here and we'll check if our item.product.photo is not null, then we want to display it using an IMG tag. And we know it's going to be in our IMG folder, and then in our product uploads folder. So this image tag's only going to show up if we have a photo in the database. And we also want to only show it as a thumbnail. So I'll use our little thumb class that we created last week. Now our delete link we're going to need to modify a bit. In my delete link, my ASP action, I don't want to call a delete method. I'm going to call a remove from cart method. If we have time, we'll code this method today. If not, I can always record it and put it in a video after class. Still going to be passing in the ID from the cart. Can still say delete, but we're going to change the action. So I'm going to save these changes. I'll go back to my browser and we'll look at this page and see how it looks. So I'm going to reload my cart. It may destroy my session, which means my cart's going to be empty and I'll have to repopulate it. Okay, so I'll just shop again. Okay, so it crashes here. And the reason is because our products are not being pulled in properly. If you recall the product name, when we finished this page last week and loaded it today, the product names were actually not showing up. So we need to make a little adjustment to the cart method in our store controller to fix this error. So you may get this error. If you do, that's perfectly normal. I'm going to go back to the store controller and load my cart method. So the problem is here on line 132, where we're querying the cart table. Now remember what the relationship is between cart and product. Product is the parent and cart is the child. One product is in many carts, but one cart item has one and only one product. When we query the cart table like this, this doesn't give us access to that parent object. So before our where clause, we're going to use an include function with a lambda to include the parent product for each item in the cart. So I'm going to add this into my query in front of the where clause. Visual Studio is not really happy right now. It's given us a little red error. In order to use the include function, we just need to add a reference. So if we add a reference to Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, I'll just accept the suggested reference. And now my include function is recognized. Okay, so our query, which I've put in the chat, I've just inserted this highlighted code in blue into the middle of my query. So this allows us not only to get the cart object, but the parent product that's attached to each item in the cart. It's basically doing a join for us. Under the hood, it will write an SQL to do a join. So let's try this again. I'll just shrink my browser down so you can still see the code. And I know some of you may need to see the HTML again on the cart page. That's fine. I'll put it back up. Now I'll add to cart. So now our product name and the photo show up. We do need to format these as currency. This is currency. I also want to right align these columns. I'll show you why. So if I go back, the values are actually left aligned, which don't look very good. Our numbers should be right aligned for better formatting. It's looking a little better. We also can make our product names links, so we can click on them and then go to the product details page. Most carts will allow us to view the product details just in case we want to look one more time at the product before we confirm our order. So we want to add that as well. We want to turn these product names into links, format as currency our prices, and right align our quantity and price columns. So we've made some improvements. We're going to make a few more changes. I'll then put the final version up in a paste bin for you. So I'm going to go back up to my header row first. And in my quantity and price headings, I'm going to align them to the right. So I'll use a class of text-right. I'm going to put in both my quantity heading, my price heading. I also want to put it down below inside my loop in the quantity and price TD tags. So all four of those columns are going to be right aligned. I'm also going to change the formatting of the price by using string.format and using Microsoft's kind of wonky currency format. So this should show all the price values as currency. The other change I want to make is up here where we're showing the product name. We don't want to just display it as HTML, as static text. We want to make it a link. So what I'll do is create an anchor tag. Our ASP controller is going to be products. Our ASP action is going to be details. And our ASP root ID is going to be our @item dot product ID. And I'll close my anchor at the end. So now the product names are links where a user can click on a product and go and see details about the product. So I've made changes to line 42 and to line 30. We're cleaning it up, we're adding formatting, we're adding useful functionality for our users. So I'm going to try this out. I want to make sure the product links work and load the correct product details page, that our prices and quantities are all aligned to the right, and our prices are formatted as currency. So I'll go back and shop again. So I'll put one of these in my cart. Whoops. I think I'm just missing an @ symbol here. My link is right, but it's not displaying the product name. So I missed an @ symbol here. So we want to be sure we put an @ symbol in the front of that text so our product name is dynamic. But now things are aligned to the right. We'll try it again. So I'll buy one of those. And 10 of those. So things are right aligned. And now each product name is a link that jumps me to the full product details. So the last thing we want to do is build a footer row where we need to keep a running total of our cart. So for each item, we want to multiply the quantity and the price and keep a running total that we can display down here. And then we also want to include at the bottom a keep shopping and a checkout link. Then this page is done. So up in the top here, in this server-side section, I'm going to declare a variable of type double. I'll call it total, and we'll initialize it to 0. So as we iterate through the items in the cart, we can keep updating our total. So declare a variable up at the top of type double, give it an initial value of 0. Then I'm going to scroll down inside our for each. And before we start our new row, we'll say total plus equals our item.quantity times our item.price. So this way, each time our cart displays a new item, we'll calculate the cost of that particular beer based on the price and quantity, and we'll add it to our running cart total. And then we're going to build one more row in our table underneath our loop, so it appears as the footer of the table, where we can display the price as well as our keep shopping and checkout buttons. So after our curly brace closes, I'm going to add a new row. My first column, it'll span the first 4 columns because we want the price to appear over here underneath the other prices. So I'll use a call span of 4 and a class of text right. And in here, we will format and display our total. So again, we'll use our currency format. And then we'll create one more column with a couple of buttons. We'll have a keep shopping button and we'll have a checkout button. So this will be ASP action equals index. So if we click keep shopping, it's just going to take us back to the main store page where again we can pick a category. Our second button is going to call our next action that we're going to make, which we call checkout. So we'll have two buttons that'll appear at the bottom right of our shopping cart. We've made a lot of changes to this page. So once we're satisfied with the functionality and the visual changes, I'll push it to GitHub in case you need to grab the code. Or I guess I could use, said I'd put it on paste bin. That's fine. So I'll try my cart one more time. We want to see a total at the bottom with a couple of buttons to the right. Okay, so it gives me a running total. I click keep shopping. Okay, so our cart's being totaled, it's formatted, everything's aligned. We can see all the products with the links to the details and the images. So a much better shopping cart. Are there some other things we could probably do with it? Yes. Right now, when I click checkout, we're going to get this because we don't have a checkout method. But that's what we're going to do next. So here's my entire view. So here's the paste bin link to the HTML if you need it. So our shopping cart maybe isn't totally 100% finished, but it's pretty good. I think good enough for our purposes. Does anybody have any questions about the shopping cart page or the controller method that we're using to populate it? So the next thing we want to do with this is we need to create our checkout method in our controller. Now we're going to have two versions of the checkout method. We're going to have a get that will display a form, and we'll have a post that will then submit the form. So the get's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to create a simple checkout method that returns a view. And then we can use scaffolding to build the view that we need. So let's go to our controller. And I'm going to make a new method here, which will be store checkout. So all this view is really going to do is, all this method is going to do is load a checkout page. We're going to return a view. However, with one wrinkle, at this point, we want customers to log in so they can shop anonymously, but once they go to checkout, we want them to register and log in. So what would we add here? What would I add above this to ensure that the checkout method is only for authenticated users? The other methods in our controller can be public, but this one needs to be private. Thank you, Cole. We just add the authorized decorator. So at this point, someone's going to have to log in. Now we do get a missing reference. So we can just accept the reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.authorization. There we go. So I'm going to save. And now I want to create a view here. So on our checkout page, we can actually scaffold this. Our checkout page is mostly modeled on our map to our order model. So this is where we're going to ask the customer for information like this, their address, city, province, postal code here. So we can actually scaffold the checkout view. So in store, my views in store, I'm going to right click. I'm going to choose add a view. I'm going to pick razor view, not empty, because we want scaffolding to build a form for us. So pick razor view in the first pop-up, click add. I'm going to call my view checkout. I'm going to pick the create template. So the scaffolding will generate an empty form. And then my model class is going to be order. And we're using our layout page. So create a new view in your view store folder. The name is checkout, the template is create, and the model is order. Our data context is going to be the same as always, which is our application DB context. We're going to use our shared layout, and then we can add the view. Darn, I picked the wrong template. I'm going to delete this and do it again. I'm sorry, we don't want a blank form. Well, let me think for a minute. Okay, you know what? It's okay. We'll leave it this way. This will work. Good enough. So let's look at it. I'm going to have to start to shop again. I'll put a few items in the cart. And I'll click checkout, which will force me to log in, and I'll use one of my customer accounts. And I'm just putting in the chat here the login that I suggested everyone create, customer1@gc.ca, and test123$ as the login. So I'll put a couple items in my cart. And now when I click checkout, first I'm going to have to log in, and then it should redirect me. And I could use either a Google account or my local account, doesn't matter. So once I log in, here's my checkout page. So it's not bad, but we should make a few changes. What do we want to change on this page? Yep. Agreed, Stella. In fact, the total we probably don't even want to make visible. Yep. The date, agreed, also. Yep. Good suggestions. I think we can remove order date, customer ID, and total. We don't need any of these things here, right? And we can also clean up the formatting so that we'll add a friendly name. So this just says postal code. So it's just going to say address, city, province, postal code. We don't need those fields. So I'm going to get rid of order date and customer ID because we'll pre-fill those things programmatically in the controller. I'm going to get rid of the total. We certainly don't want users typing in their own order total. I'm going to remove this back to list link at the bottom. And up at the top, I can also remove this H4 tag that says order because it's based on the order model. We can just keep the H1 tag that says checkout. That's good enough. I'm then going to go to the order model and set a display name for the postal code. So our label here has a space in it. The one other thing we may want to change is make our address into a text area. Because some customers are going to have a long address. It's difficult to type that in a small single line text box because users can't see the whole thing at once. And it's going to be harder for them to know if they've made a typo. So on line 16, this input ASP4 address, I'm going to change that to be text area. And text areas are not self-closing. So I'm going to have to add a separate closing tag for the address. So I've removed my order H4, removed the first two divs for the customer ID and order date. I've removed the total. I've removed the back to index. And I've just changed the address box from a single line text input to a text area. And yes, I should log in here so I can edit. Maybe I'll do that on a break. So here's the modified checkout form, if you need it. And I want to open my order model and just add an alias for postal code. So I'll go to Models and Order. And above postal code, I'll add display name equals postal code with a space. So I just added line 18 to my order model. Not critical, but we may as well clean it up. Save these changes, and I will try again. I've killed my session, so once again, I got to start to shop again. So now I've got 3 items in my cart. I'll check out. I now get a text area. So there, our checkout form's nice and simple. I should also just change the button. Instead of saying create, we'll change what's on that button. So instead of saying create, our button maybe says payment. Because that's what, after we post the form, we're going to want to redirect the user to a payment page, which is where we're going to need our Stripe gateway. So just change the value of the submit button. The other thing we should probably do is make all these fields required, now that I think about it. So I'm going to add a required attribute to each one of our inputs. So a user can't check out if they don't give us their address, city, province, and postal code. So our next step is going to be to write the post method for the checkout. Because right now there is no post handler. If we fill out the checkout form and click submit, nothing's going to happen. We haven't given any instruction to the controller what to do when this page gets posted to the server. It also seems like we left out the customer name field. I'm not going to worry about it for now. We can continue without that. So I'm going to go back to my controller. And now we want to write a second version of checkout. So this was get. This one is going to be post /store/checkout. We also need the authorized decorator. We need HTTP post. And now we're going to have, this time, what we want to do is bind the fields in our form. So we want to bind, what do we have? Address, city, province, and postal code. So we want to connect these four inputs from the form to the four properties of our order. The one other thing we should be doing to prevent cross-site scripting is calling validate anti-forgery token. So our server is going to check that the HTTP request coming in is from our same domain. It's not going to accept form post from another domain. So some of the properties of the order are coming from our checkout form, from address, city, province, and postal code. But we also then have to populate in the three items we took out: the date, the customer, and the total. Because our order method, our order model, it's expecting an order date, a customer ID, and a total. So these four properties are coming from the user on the checkout page, and we're generating the other three. So we want to populate the three automatic order properties. So our order.order date, we'll just use date time.now. We're just going to timestamp it with the current date and time. What about our customer ID? How do we get the customer ID? We know who the customer is at this point. What object can we use that will give us the customer's ID? Or some kind of identifier. Their email address is going to be good enough. That's great. Thanks, Stella. We can use the user object .identity.name. Perfect. Same value that's displayed in the header. Now the order total we're going to need to calculate. We're going to need to query, get all the objects in the cart, and again, run a quick total. So we want to calc order total based on the cart, current cart. So again, we'll fetch the items in the current cart. To use so we want to read the session variable for the current customer ID. Now I can't make this call to read the session variable inside of my query. So I'm going to need to do this separately. I'm going to move this. I'll call it cart customer. So we'll use our session variable to identify the current cart. And then we'll fetch those items from the database. And now we can write a quick query to tell us we're going to multiply for each item the quantity times the price, and then we're going to sum all of those values together. So this is going to give us one number that tells us the total value of the cart. Then we'll assign this value to the total property. So now we've got a fully populated order object. We've got the date, customer ID. We've got the address, city, province, and postal code, and then we've calculated and populated the total. So we're almost finished. At the end, we want to redirect to the payment page. So we're going to redirect to action payment, which is what we'll build next. And just like checkout, we're going to have a get and a post. A get's going to load a payment page. A post is going to process the payment using the Stripe API. Now, before we do this, though, we want to store this order object in the session. This will just take a minute. This is a little bit tricky, and here's why. If I refer to my session, HTTP context.session, if we look at the set methods, the session actually only has 3 data types we can work with. If we call set, it writes a byte value. If we call set int32, we can set an integer value. Set string will set a string value. By default, in .NET Core, the session object can't store a complex object like our order. So what we need to do instead is we're going to need to add a little extension on. So we're going to use the sessions extension object to store the order object in a session variable. Okay, this is going to take a few minutes to do. So this is actually maybe a good place for us to pause. It's 2:53. I'm going to stop here. I'll push the code up to GitHub. And then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. We'll have to poke around and look at this extension a little bit, and then we'll implement it before we move on to our payment. Now, I'm going to push to Git. Let's take a 10-minute break here.